Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprints so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Britt Frank. Britt is a clinician, educator, and trauma specialist. She speaks and writes widely about the mental health myths that keep us stuck and stressed. Britt received her BA from Duke University and her MSW from the University of Kansas, where she later became an award-winning adjunct professor. She is a somatic experiencing practitioner and level 3 trained in internal family systems therapeutic model. Britt was a primary therapist at a drug and alcohol treatment center and inpatient therapist at a children's psychiatric hospital, and now owns a private practice. Britt is the author of The Science of Stuck and the Getting Unstuck Workbook, out now wherever books are sold. Britt, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. End up hitting record right away, and I'll probably delete most of this out.
It's better than not hitting record at all. That's happened to me.
It's happened quite a few times. So yeah, we'll do that. And then fair warning, I have a German Shepherd. She's going to make an appearance probably a handful of times.
Yay.
Yeah. She's 7.
What's her name?
Chloe.
Oh, that's a good dog name.
Isn't it though? So it was gonna be like my daughter's name, but I don't know that I'm ever gonna get married or have kids.
As a member of the Child Free by Choice Club, yay, my dog is Oscar, and I'm happy that he's a dog.
Yeah, that was gonna be, and then the second name, I want to get another dog, also German Shepherd, but it would be Jack. So Jack and Chloe.
Oh, that's good. I love that. Those go together. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm pumped about this.
Yeah, me too. There's so many different ways that you and I could go on this conversation because you're just so multifaceted, like so many of us. I feel like you're Gen X, right?
Yeah, technically by a hair, but yes.
I feel like that's so like just a representation of the whole of Gen X is that we're multi-passionate. We can do all these different things. We have done all these different things in our lifetime. I've been a chef. I've been a police officer. I've been a non-traditional student going back to school in my 30s, and I'm debating going back to school again to become a therapist, but it's
do it.
Here's the deal. And the only reason why I would do it is because everybody's, what's your credentials? And so I already have a master's degree in threat and response management from the University of Chicago. So it's, as far as like credentialing goes, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, you don't need it then. And if you're licensed, you're restricted geographically.
And with that being like the way I think about things, I read so much. If you saw my library, you'd be like, oh my God. And if you saw my Audible, you'd be like, yeah, there's something wrong with you, because I dive into all this stuff and I can't stop.
Yeah.
But it's like self-education, I think is just, it's so important. And I don't know that we do enough of that, judging by the comment section of a lot of my posts. So I encourage people, I'm like, look, credentialing is important to, if you're doing something very specific, right? But for what I'm doing and my purposes, it's healing the relationship that you have with yourself. And so this is really for you to get to know who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and the why behind why you're doing it. And I think so many of us struggle in that area, and we feel stuck, and it's really hard to get beyond who am I? We don't often get past that question. And so before we get too deep into this, I want you to tell everybody who you are, who you help.
Who are any of us?
I know.
Who are you?
Yeah, but so your story, it's so interesting to me because once again, it's a story of hope. It's a Rocky story. It's the hero's journey. I've done all these other things, and then I did all this other amazing stuff on the back end of this, and it's nonstop. It's still growing. So share that with us if you will.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brit Frank, and I'm a licensed neuropsychotherapist and a trauma specialist, and the author of The Science of Stuck and now the Getting Unstuck Workbook. It's funny though, because I agree with you that credentialing and going through the system and the process can be valuable, but like everything I know about what I practice, none of that I learned in school. None, zero, like a total of zero I learned in graduate school of what I now know and do. So front facing, I'm trained in somatic experiencing, which is a la-di-la way of saying you have a body and a brain and it does things. I'm trained in internal family systems, which is we all have multiple personalities. It's not a disorder. It's just how human minds are wired. And I'm also a recovering hot mess disaster of a human turned therapist. So yay, Gen X, we can do all the things.
So when you say that you were a hot mess, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So quantifiably, my hot mess looked like addicted to crystal meth, eating disorders, addicted to pills, opiates, really toxic relationships, just a whole bunch of shenanigans and chaos. I thought I was crazy. There's no such thing as crazy. Sidebar, don't DM me. Insanity is not a real thing. That's a legal term. Having a mental illness doesn't make you crazy. It means your brain needs other things. Okay, great. Like needing glasses doesn't make you insane. Needing psych meds doesn't either. That's my disclaimer there. But yeah, I just really didn't know how to human. I felt like I got sent out from the human factory with a bunch of parts and pieces missing.
Oh
And
man.
so I
Yeah.
didn't become a therapist out of this great love for humanity and desire to help people. That's awesome I'm not that altruistic. It was more like I was so fascinated by the things that I was learning. I became obsessive and obnoxious about all I want to do is read about, talk about, be about this stuff. And so I did a mid-30s pivot and went back to graduate school and got licensed and trained up, and here we are.
You are a neuropsychotherapist. What is that and what do they do?
Yeah. So here's a piece of horrifying true information. Therapists, like mental health professionals, someone who is licensed and credentialed and certified and takes insurance and all that, therapists are not all required to know anything about the brain. You can become licensed and fully operational as a therapist and never once be required to take a class about the brain or the central nervous system. It's like a doctor not having to take anatomy. It is
Yeah.
wild, but that's true. And so being trained in the brain and the neuro is just nervous system. So being trained in the brain and the nervous system, which is a sad state of our system, is a specialty. And it cost a lot of money out of my pocket and time and energy to learn what I now know. But neuropsychotherapist just means I have training in how your brain and nervous system do their thing, which is really impactful and important. And it should be taught, and it's not.
Can you give us a brief overview of how those things are connected and how do you utilize that?
Yeah. So if you and I were sitting having lunch and a lion walked into the restaurant, you and I are both going to either go into fight, flight, or freeze. You'd probably go into fight and try to punch the lion in the face. I would just completely go into freeze. I'm making a full judgment there. That's my own projection. That has nothing to do with you. Our bodies do these things like shut down, like freak out. And often what the mental health world calls a disorder or a disease is our brain and our nervous system doing what they're supposed to do, which is keep us alive in the face of either an actual threat, a perceived threat, a misunderstood threat, or an injury from the past that's still getting coded as a threat. And again, this is important to me to disclaim. I'm not saying that mental health stuff is not real. I take psych meds, I go to therapy. It's real. But the way we frame it, disorder, disease, something's wrong with you, you're broken. No. Like panic is an appropriate response to whatever is going on. Depression is usually an appropriate doesn't mean you should stay there, but I'm
Yeah.
really big on take out this pathological something's wrong with you model and look at signals as symptoms and storytellers.
How can we start to remove ourselves from that pathology though? Because when you look at social media by itself, you can go into my comment section. So I that monkey meme, have you seen? I couldn't help myself. Oh no. And it's just and then you put something interesting there, but I made it loosely about narcissism, very loosely. And the comment section just got filled with all of this stuff and it's to me it's just so insane because there's no part of me that goes into a comment section and it's here's all this stuff. I'm angry and I'm frustrated, I'm irritated, and I'm sad, and I'm lonely, and I'm depressed, and you're the reason, and you're an idiot, and you're stupid, and da 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 da. And it just goes on and on and on. And you're just like, whoa, slow your roll. It's a meme, right? But you're obviously looking at it through a very different lens. And so I've had to step back, zoom out, and really look at those comments. And then you go to their profiles and you can see some of the circumstances and issues and problems and other things that they have going on in their life. And so then there's compassion and empathy and all these other things that are going there. But how could we begin to navigate people away from the weaponization of therapy speak, not only against other people, but against themselves?
Yeah, and good on you for the compassion and empathy. The best I can do is
You don't have a
detachment.
choice.
But taking this brokenness pathology thing off the table doesn't mean all behavior is okay. Like someone raging in the comments section, I imagine has a lot of pain and perhaps trauma, and I have empathy for that, but I have no tolerance for like all feelings are valid, all expressions of your feelings are not. That's a
Yeah.
thing. So the weaponization of therapy speak, my solution to that, and I say this as a licensed clinician, is I don't use it. Like, I
Yeah.
don't use the word trauma. I call it brain indigestion because that's what it is. So instead of using these, is he a narcissist? Is she a sociopath? Okay, does it matter? What's the behavior? What are you tolerating? And what are your choices? So I'm big on all of this. They're attached, and I'm big on attachment. I love attachment theory, but let me obsess over whether my partner is an avoidant or disorganized. I'm like, great, forget about what it's called. Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about impact versus definition. And I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm not saying we should gatekeep the words. I'm saying let's talk about things like what they are instead of this la-di-da psychobabble nonsense that does nobody any good.
What's your feeling on labels then?
Okay. So for me, when I got my labels initially, it was such a relief to know this was a thing and
It's helpful.
it's helpful to
Yeah.
have the label, the diagnosis as a starting place.
Yeah.
But a diagnosis and a label should be origin point, launch pad, not final destination.
I agree. It's one of those things. And when I work with people, I tell them it's you use the label, I'm anxious, right? I'm an anxious attacher. And it's that's great. That's fine. That tells you a lot about you and how you navigate the world and the lens through which you see it and how you enter into relationships and how you navigate relationships. That's great information for you. Now, what are you going to do with that? Because you can use this as a superpower to begin to recognize what you're capable of in the context of a relationship. You have a lot of empathy, you have a lot of love, there's a lot of care that goes into these relationships. But then you have to also recognize the behavior of the other person and the reaction of the other person and what's going on in the context of that relationship. And are these things helpful in the moment? Am I pushing the other person away because I'm being a little too much in the moment trying to get my needs met by this other person when maybe I should have taken some time to zoom out, right? Step back, reflect a moment, and can I meet something for myself in this moment? And that's where the understanding of your attachment style becomes that superpower because you begin to recognize that I'm actually in more control of my body and my nervous system than I give my own self credit for.
It's so true. And even the am I pushing them away? I've seen, and again, all of the information, there's a place for almost everything.
Mhm.
But am I pushing them away is an interesting question. I would think a better question would be, are you showing up the way you want? Are you showing up in a way that's aligned with how you want to be and who you can be? And taking that control and that power back inward rather than if if I say the perfect attachment languaged things, I can guarantee an outcome with this other person.
Right.
And again, that takes your power and completely outsources it to another person, which is a really bad place to put it. I know I have tried. I have put my power in people, places, things, chemicals, like all of it. Doesn't work. But it's really confronting when it's, yeah, but we can take our focus off of them and then it's on us. And I don't know about you, but I was really not about looking at my own stuff for a really long time because it was
No,
painful and gross and ick.
it didn't exist. It's everybody else's problem.
Right.
You're the one that's messed up. You need to go to therapy. You need to do the work.
Yeah.
It's not me. What's
I'm
going on
fine.
here? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is strange. Get away from me. Ew. How can we begin to take our power back then?
Ugh.
What does that look like?
Yeah, and so this goes back to your question of like, how do we start to go away from the you're broken, you're pathologized, you have a disorder? Start with we're all so quick to be like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I'm panicking? What's wrong with me that I'm attaching this way? What's wrong? Let's start with assume that your brain is smarter than you are because if you're alive, it means your brain has done its job and it has done it very well. So let's start with assume your brain is not stupid. You may, and I'm not talking about I'm talking about your brain's survival functions. Our brains are designed for survival, not success. They're designed to keep us alive, not in love. So we got to work with how the system is designed. Start with my brain is on my side, my brain is on my side. Because all of our language, I battle depression, panic attacks, I'm fighting with this part of me that wants to go do bad things. The the enemy is not inside our own minds. If we treat our own brains like we're at war, our brains are very literal. If I tell my brain, oh, I just need to get rid of this inner critic and banish them, that's going to create some very real chemicals in your body that you do not want. Start with the assumption your brain is on your side. What are your choices? That is a much better place to go than why is this happening? Why am I broken? Or even the why do they do that? I get a lot of why did they do that? Okay, I can answer that. I am trained to answer that question.
So why
But
do they
like,
do that?
does it matter? What does that change? If
Nothing.
it doesn't change that when I used to
Yeah.
work with children, I had a play therapy practice way back. And when a kid would say to me, "Why did my mom die?" They're not asking me to explain during their long and chronic battle with cancer, they stopped responding to keep, they don't care when they say, why do they do that? What they mean is, I don't like that happened. And so when someone is saying, why is my partner doing this? Why is so and so doing this? Change that why to an I feel statement. I don't like that this is happening. And then what are my choices? Eek.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So to ask yourself that question as a follow-up, I like that. Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that keeps people really stuck is the why question. Like, I need to understand why, and then it will change. When I was neck deep in my own BS, I could tell you why. There came a point where I learned enough about my own crap to tell you this is why this happened, and this is why that happened. And here I am with like a broken light bulb and a straw sucking meth smoke out of it. It's like the why is great, but why is not a starting gate question. If we were talking like running a marathon, why is like a mile 9 question, not a get out of the starting gate and get yourself running question? We'll answer the why question later, but often by the time you're ready for the why, you don't need it anymore. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, this next part is going to feed the anxious attachers. So this is a common question. What is the avoidant thinking? And how can I get them to do what I want them to do, which is come back into relationship with me? Why does the anxious attacher always in that place of trying to figure out the other person and their experience?
So I'll answer it, but I'm going to be bitchy first. And I'll
Yeah,
say,
it's fine.
I would say, it sounds like you're trying to control another person. And it sounds like you believe that if you do X, Y, and Z, that you can make them attached to you in a way. Sounds like there are parts of you that are in a lot of pain. And it sounds like there are parts of you that once upon a time, this was a thing. And it was very bad for you when it happens. Maybe we can talk about that.
It goes back to that early part of childhood where they're trying to get their needs met from their caregiver, and then they become an adult and they don't recognize that scenario, that pattern is actually what's playing out in this moment. When you try to have that conversation with them, especially from a coaching perspective, it's really hard to get there sometimes because they're so used to, if they wanted to, they would. They should be doing this for me. They should
Ah.
be meeting my needs. Like, why is this not happening right now?
I have a great example for that because after many very bad relationships, I am married now to a relatively as healthy as humans can get. No one's perfect, but I am a mess. Like, I'm not dirty, but I'm messy and I leave stuff out. He's former military and he is very incredibly clean. I could go to, if he loved me, he wouldn't care that my like front door looks like a logistics center with all the Amazon packages and all the crap that I order. But he could just as easily say, if she loved me, she would put her crap away. So
Right.
if we're going with if they wanted to, they would, who gets to be top in that? That's not a thing because that negates the reality that you have two people in a relationship and compatibility might not be there. We've since worked it out. I try a little and he tries to care less. But if they wanted to, they would. If you wanted to, you would. So
Right.
how does that work? It's too simple. Humans are way too complex for that. But yeah, how do I get the person to love me in the way that I want? The answer is you can't. Yeah, I can give you little tricks and tips and communication hacks or how to say the perfect thing to someone who's avoidant, but you can't control other people.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because it's what's really going on is you don't understand something. And so you're answering your own question by saying, you know what, if they wanted to, they would. But what you're recognizing is there's actually behaviors, there's an incompatibility, there's other issues that are going on in the background that aren't being addressed, or you don't know how to look at them, or you don't know that they exist because you're just currently blinded by the scenario. So you can't get there. And if you're not journaling, if you're not diving in or doing any of the parts work or any of this other stuff, then you're not going to be tied into that. And you get to this place, you're going to make a TikTok and be angry about they if they wanted to, they would.
The problem with relationships is that our brains are really not wired for modern dating. Like, our brains are not equipped to handle all of the choices and all of the information and everything. And so what happens in modern dating is we all become little drug addicts. And I'm not saying that glibly. I am a former chemical and person shaped drug user and eating disorders, all of them. I'm not minimizing it. I am saying that modern dating turns you into a little bit of a love seeking junkie on these constant cycles of craving, use, withdraw. When you're swiping, you're constantly on a cycle of craving, use, withdraw. Now, as an actual drug addict, it would take me at least a few hours between I want to pick up, I'm getting my thing, I'm using my thing, and now I feel like crap because I'm withdrawing. But when we're swiping it on the apps, we're going through these addiction cycles at warp speed. And I have a lot of compassion. At least there was a degree to which when I was using drugs, I knew drugs were bad. It's not like that was confusing to me. I'm not saying it's a choice. I'm saying it's not confusing. Like meth, bad, duh. But on dating apps, you don't know that there are physiological, neurochemical things at play that are causing a lot of these behaviors. And if you don't know that you're on this addiction cycle, how are you going to expect yourself to have any type of successful outcome? So I do have a lot of compassion for the dilemma.
That's the gamification of it all. You hop on the app and it's popped in your quarter, you pulled the thing, and now let's see what happens. But at the same time, we're also addicted to the newness of relationships. And then there's so much variety out there for us that I can constantly be in the new. And that feels really good to me. And it feels good to my nervous system because I'm getting all this new stuff. I'm getting this attention. This feels really awesome. And then 3, 6, 9 months later, that's worn off. And you're like, what happened? I don't understand. I'm no longer interested in this actually.
It's wild. I have a whole thing on like, here's what happens to your brain when you are dating. Like your amygdala turns off essentially, which is why that's the fear response. That's the maybe don't date that person for the 20th time little messenger in your brain. That part just conks out and goes to sleep. And then your serotonin drops, which then makes your anxiety spike. But then you have dopamine and all these other chemicals having a spring break party in your brain, which then kicks you into withdrawal. And then when relationships steady out and become, quote, normal, and your brain chemistry starts to right itself, it's not that you're bored with the person, it's that you're in drug withdrawal and you don't know it.
Ooh. How can we bring more attention to that before we get to that place? Because so many people, they ruin the potential of good relationships. Like they've met a person, they're actually a really good person, but then they get to this place where I just don't feel it. There's no chemistry. How can we begin to navigate that or identify it?
Yeah. So if I were to tell you, you need to completely change your eating habits, and for the next 30 days, we're going to do a eating protocol that you've never done before. Let's say that you
No.
were a pack a day smoker and a 20 beer a day drinker and a fast food eater. What do you think would happen if you just tried to jump into a health food plan with just and hope for the best? Like it, what do you
I
think
know
would happen?
I know because I've done it. I was a pack a day smoker for God, almost 10 years. And then for me, it was a cold turkey moment. I just hit a point where I'm like, boom, I'm done. That's it. I'm no longer doing this ever again. And I think I faltered 2 more times after that, and now it's been well over a decade since, so yeah, but no, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of resistance, and then, of course, that withdrawal process, it was a year and a half before your brain shuts off and no longer says, "Hey, I'm stressed, I need a cigarette."
It's wild, but that you need to plan for it. When we're
Yeah.
talking about relationships and dating, you need a plan for the first 2 weeks of chemical cocktail party brain chemistry. You're going to need a plan for that 90-day mark when things are settling down and then you get bored. And then you're going to need a plan for if it doesn't work out, how to support yourself through the detox process. Like you need to be real as strategic with dating as we are with businesses. Like nobody would build a building without a blueprint. No one would launch a business without a business plan. We actually need to do the same because our brains are on our side, but our brain's agenda is going to be very different than my logical, I would like to be in a healthy, intimate relationship agenda. And it's not that they're fighting each other, it's just that they have different goals. So, in order to bring everything into alignment, we need to come up with a plan because you're not going to think your way through it. You cannot outthink your chemistry. That is not a thing.
There's also intention. So I think so many people they go into dating, and I didn't mean for this to turn into a dating talk session, but But they go into it and it's just like they're dating to date. Let's see where it goes. Let's just see what happens. Why can't we just take it however it goes? Like whatever pops up is going to be fine with me. And you have to get intentional about it. What is your purpose behind this? Why are you trying to connect with this person? What is your long and short term goal with this? I always tell people we're looking for interdependence in the context of a relationship. Do you have a shared mission and vision for where you're going? Are you co creating? What are you creating?
And if you want to date to date, that's fine. Like, I'm not saying everyone needs to be pair bonded in a monogamous intimate situation, but we do need to be intentional. I can't just go, and if I went to a bar and just took 10 tequila shots and just to see what happens. It's But
Right.
that's what happens with dating, and it's not about people who are strong versus weak or smart versus whatever. It's your brain chemistry is designed to do a different thing than you want it to do. So we do need intentionality for things to go well. You don't
No,
have to do anything. It'll go better if you plan.
yeah, we also need integrity because I see this a lot, especially with coaching, is people get into relationship with one another, but the other person, like their intention, they already know the other person isn't for them. They don't want to necessarily be with them, but they often ask themselves, what if this is the best I can do? They'll stay in a relationship or a situationship because it's comfortable in the moment. They're getting their needs met in the process, but then they're denying the other person the love and the potential that is for them that's out there. You're stopping both of you from being able to experience what life has to offer you because what if this is the best I can do?
Which is a real fear, and I can appreciate it. That
Yeah.
belief, that fear kept me in like violently abusive relationships. The whole like, why don't they leave nonsense? I used to be so full of like when I was like early 20s, late teens, like if anyone ever hit me or cheated on me, I'd be out the door. It's really easy to judge until you're in that situation, and things change very quickly. So that fear of what if this is the best I can do, that's a me problem. That's not going to get solved by a relationship, no matter how awesome the other person is.
Right.
And so that's going to require me to step back and really contend with all the different parts of my mind, the parts that are scared, that's why with attachment, it's really, we all have all of the attachment styles. I have a certain one that dominates intimacy. I have a certain one that shows up when I'm at work. I have one that's predominant when I'm in friendships. So it's more like what relationships trigger which of your attachment styles. Like a nice person might trigger avoidance, and a toxic person might trigger I want to cling, which is again why I forget about what it's called. Let's talk about what it is, and then all the way drill it down. What are your choices? Like
Yeah.
we can bring almost anything all the way back down to that, and that's going to get us from stuck to unstuck, and it won't be pretty, but it'll work.
I can't thank you enough for phrasing it like that. But we all have the different attachment styles inside of us, but depending on the situation, the environment, the person, the place, whatever's going on around us is going to be impacted by that and what it brings up for you. So you can recognize it as more of a spectrum and you might lean one way, and that's
Yeah.
totally fine. And having that understanding is great for you. But by no means do you have to wear that for a label as an excuse in the future that I'm just anxious, I'm avoidant. It's just the way it is. It's the way I'm always going to be. Love me for me or don't. And it's no.
That's the same thing with diagnosis, right? Like understanding your attachment patterns is not your be all end game, we're done. That's your starting place. And then knowing how you skew, what are your choices? What are you going to do about it? What are you willing to say yes to? That's a big, why do they do that? What are you willing to tolerate? What are you willing to say yes to? What are you unwilling to say yes to? That's going to create forward motion. That's going to create mobility. But it's also really terrifying because having my own power now, I wouldn't trade for anything. But back then, somebody take it from me, please. Somebody tell me who I am and what to think and what to wear and how to do and be, because I didn't want to do it. Constructing a personality is tough.
So how did you construct a personality?
I had to do a very dramatic burn it all to the ground and lose everything and flee the scene with nothing but the clothes in my car and
I
like
love
all
it.
of that is so ugh. I had to really be willing to start with nothing, to take
Yeah.
everything, lose it, and start with something as simple as what do I feel like eating today? Like in the post meth recovery, like I would go days without eating. And I remember a sponsor would be like, you have to start with choices that are not going to cost you anything. Do you want to turn left or right when you get to that corner? Do you really want to be wearing that? Why'd you put those clothes on this morning? When I used to work in inpatient drug rehab, that's what we start with. Your brain can't start with trauma and childhood and mother wound and father wound and attachment. Let's start with, did you make a decision about what to wear and eat today and which road to take to get to work? Or were you just on autopilot? Because autopilot will keep you in default mode. We have to break autopilot, and doing anything differently gets that job done.
You're reminding me of so many different things that have happened in my own life. You have 2 different books now. You've got The Science of Stuck, and what's the name of your newest book?
The new
The
one that just
workbook?
came out, the Getting Unstuck workbook.
What was the catalyst behind The Science of Stuck? What made you wanna write that?
So the Science is Stuck is my love letter to all of the teachers and modalities and philosophers and people that inspired me, because I found when I was in my like tornado vortex, I didn't have the bandwidth to sit there and dig through the mountain of books. I'm like, can someone please just cherry pick bottom, like I just want to know basics about attachment. I just want to know bottom line about boundaries. I don't want to read through 90 pages of fluff to get the one thing I need. So the Science of Stuck takes these main categories: intimacy, boundaries, anxiety, stress, family, and just gives you just the nuggets that you need. It was the book I needed when I started my journey. And so it was really fun to write the book for the younger me that she would have really needed to use. And of course, I snuck a few of my own theories in there. But largely, the Science of Stuck is like, all right, polyvagal theory, you want to talk nervous system? Let's take it out of the academic rafters and talk about what we're talking about, and making it really simple to understand. The workbook is like, for some people, even reading a bottom line, here are the nuggets book is too much of a lift. And so the workbook I wrote, when you're just like, I need things to do right now. It's not intended to be therapy. It's not intended to solve all of the problems of the world. But if you're like, I need to do something or I'm going to crawl out of my skin, the workbook is the solution for that.
How did you come to structure the workbook the way that you did? I think it's brilliant. I love the way that you did it.
Thank you. Okay, I would get really pissy doing workbooks. I would get so bitchy. I don't want to read it. Or when they're like, make sure you have 15 minutes and clear a quiet space and make sure you do these exercises in order.
Right.
Like, I would go into a rage response. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't learn that way. I don't want to do all your stupid. I mean, talk about regression to an inner child state. So I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do a workbook, I want to know where are the things that speak to my learning style. So when you open the workbook right off the bat is a quiz, and it's like a 10 question easy little thing. Based on that, you find out, are you predominantly like a thinker? Are you a feeler? Are you I want to do the things, or are you a mindfulness person? And then you flip through the book and you look for the little icons that point you towards just those types of things. So you can customize it and not be wading through a bunch of BS trying to find the stuff that you need. So I really wanted to make it like a choose your own adventure. Take this thing and customize it to your exact learning style and then use it as a GPS. I thought that was like, that shouldn't be clever or new, but I hadn't seen it. I hadn't come across it. So again, I wrote the book I needed.
No, I love it for the way that my brain works. It works for me. What do you think I am after the quiz? What would you place me as?
Keeping in mind I'm projecting because I don't know you.
Uh-huh.
So if I'm just like, my brain is going through its file, I would say immediately, oh, clearly you're either a thinker or an action person.
Think I'm a thinker.
You're a thinker. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was funny. So I think it was the last question. And it just made me laugh because resolving an argument with a friend, which of these would you like to do with them next? And I was like, None, like none of those things. I'm like, because I'm also more disorganized. So for me, it's we just had an argument. Like I'm out.
Yeah.
I'll see you like eventually. Like I'll come back. Yeah. So for me, it was I guess we're gonna go for a walk afterwards so that we
So you could
can.
be side by side and
Yeah,
not have to look at each other.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of the choices that was the choice.
I had fun with that. I really did. I wanted to make it like, self help can be a drag. It could
Yeah.
either be so clinical, it reads like a textbook, or so fluffy. I didn't need to spend the money to just say, to have a workbook tell me take a deep breath. Okay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's again, a space at the table for everything. But I really wanted it to be useful right away without you having to dig for what you need. Because life's hard and we don't have a lot of time. There's no time to dig for stuff.
No, there's not. And when it comes to just the ability to comprehend a lot of the stuff that gets thrown at us, like we're just inundated with information all the time. Can you hear her?
She's I don't mind hearing a dog ever. Now she's quiet. No, she's
No,
not.
she's about to go on one.
You're a thinker. We were talking about
Yeah,
not
so
wanting to dig.
yeah, so it's the comprehension of everything because we get inundated with so much information all the time and it's just totally nonstop. So it's like when you look at the workbook, it's so refreshing because I can grab it, I can look at it, I read it, and I'm not going through and like trying to find my phone and look up a word and try to figure out what that word means and what's the application here. It's very easy to go through. That creates a sense of peace where you might have a little bit of high anxiety or frustration or irritation trying to get into something like this. So it's very approachable. I really like that about the book. Now, I did have another question when it comes to self image and ideal self as it relates to the 8 C's of relationship. If you can go through that for us, what's the difference between those?
We're talking about self. It's not even self image. It's just self, period. So, capital, and this is from the internal family systems model, Dr. Richard Schwartz's work, and I really like it. So, he talks about at the core of who we are is the self, capital S. In some spiritual traditions, you can call it Christ consciousness or soul or spirit or source energy. I mean, self is just the easiest way to make it accessible for everybody, which I really like. So at the core of who you are is yourself. And the 8 C's are like the characteristics of the capital S self: curious, compassionate, collaborative, creative, able to stay centered and calm and grounded. That's a G word. But when we're in that self, and some people call it flow, when you have
Yeah.
access to your capital S self, it doesn't mean all these other parts of you go away. It means that there is a leader, a competent coach, or CEO of your inner boardroom, or insert metaphor of your choice. But like when capital S self is running the show, that's when you are responsive and not reactive. That's when you can be decisive instead of spinning in the being stuck in the analysis spin. So, like, the task here is not how do I get rid of these parts of myself that I don't like. The task is how do we anchor you in your capital S self so that there's someone in charge of all of those parts of you, which is really, I love this approach because I still have really wacky intrusive thoughts, if you want to use the clinical terms. My brain goes to some really
That's
wild
actually my
places.
next question.
Like I still like if you could hold a microphone to my head and hear, you'd be horrified. Like what the actual hell?
I'm
But
with you. Can we pause right there for a second and just
yes,
go into intrusive thoughts and
yeah.
what are they? Because TikTok keeps telling me from my creator insights, you need to create more topics on intrusive thoughts, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm actually not going to do that. So what are they?
So again, just to be a responsible online therapist person,
Yeah.
I don't know for every single person that what I'm saying is fact and gospel universally. Sometimes intrusive thoughts are like you need a psych drug to make that stop so you don't hurt yourself or someone else. And if you're hearing voices, not the inner chatter, but if you're hearing voices that aren't in your mind from outside yourself, like that's an immediate medical necessity. Like we got to get you to a doctor for that. And again, it doesn't mean you're crazy or insane. It's just we have some brain things that all the positive thinking and affirmations in the world are not going to solve. So when I'm talking about intrusive thoughts, no, there's not this thought telling you to hurt yourself or someone else that's coming from outside you and that you're not currently in danger. That should ward off all of the angry DMs. Okay. So with that said, intrusive thoughts can be anything from I have a lot of trauma. I have sexual trauma, I have assault trauma, and so because those things happen to me, those imprints sometimes show up as weird thoughts. Oh, I'm not going to say what they are cuz I don't want to get super triggery, but like all the weird thoughts that everyone in a room nods when I say, like the ones that go, what the heck was that? The thoughts aren't the problem. It's my response to the thoughts. I'm not in myself all the time. But when I think something like really wild and terrible, I can say to myself, okay, Britt, I understand why you would think that. Like sometimes I can just acknowledge it and let the thought go by. But if it's like a repetitive, intrusive thought that is like the same thing over and over again that keeps coming up, then it's okay, Britt, I understand you're trying to get my attention. So, what are our choices here for what we can do? Not everyone can go to therapy. That's fair.
Right.
But honoring that the voices inside your head are also on your side. They want to help you. And intrusive thoughts are often cries for help from younger part of us.
I'll probably edit this portion out, but having work crime scene, there's a lot of things that will continuously pop up for me. And it's what? Why
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Like, why is that popping up? Sometimes it's obvious, right? I just drove past a place and that's where it occurred or whatever was going on. But then sometimes it's just like I'm in my home gym, I'm working out, and it's like all
Yeah.
of a sudden it's just like the Rolodex opens up and hands you this thing, and it's just why is that coming up for me?
Which is why I don't like the why questions, because it happens to me too. But if you think about, your nervous system is taking in every single bit of information and not all of it is conscious. I just assume that when that happens to me, and it still does frequently, I don't go into the why, because it's okay. Do I really need to know that in 1984, when I was alone at home, something happened? It's thank you, brain. Got it. Thank you. Do you
Yeah.
need me, or did you just want to say hi? And often it's just the acknowledgement is enough to quiet it down. And if it doesn't, and sometimes it doesn't, then it's all right. Like we need to maybe talk to somebody and get some resources. But it's never why now. It's always thanks, brain. What are my choices right now?
So what are my choices?
So it's happened to me during therapy. So I'll be talking to someone who has a similar
Mm,
trauma history. And again, I'm
yeah.
not acutely in recovery. So it's not like I'm actively working with someone who's going through the same thing at the same time. But if someone describes a sexual trauma that sounds like mine, I'll feel parts of me start spinning and start getting, I'll feel my heart rate elevate. I'll feel my palms sweat. That's not a good time to start journaling or meditating. Like I'm in the room with a client. So
Right.
I will have a conversation, a quick one with that part of me that says, I see you, I hear you, you're not crazy. Right now, we have to help this person. As soon as session is over, I'm going to come back to you and we'll figure out what we need to do. Do we need to talk to someone, or was this a quick flashback that just needed some acknowledgement? But and again, that's like a muscle. It doesn't always work right away, but like any muscle, when you have practice in dialoguing with the different parts, the different aspects of your mind, then they feel safe. And attachment inward is not talked about. But the most secure attachment that we want to build first is not with my partner, it's between my capital S self and all the different parts of me.
How do we create a more secure attachment with ourselves?
It helps if we talk like with ourselves instead of at ourselves. I'm being stupid. I should just shut up. This is dumb. I shouldn't care about this. I know this person's
You're
bad for me. What's
yeah.
wrong with me?
You're an idiot. Why did you do that? That was stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not gonna build secure attachment. If you said that to me, I'd be like, "F o" well, 20 years ago, I would have been like, "I'm sorry." Now I'd be like, "Yeah, no, bye."
Yeah.
But it starts with, you have to start not talking at yourself or yelling at yourself, but I say change your inner monologue, "I suck, I'm dumb," to an inner dialogue. "Hey, part of me. Hey, Britt, let's talk. What's going on?" But you have to talk to that part like you would a friend. You're not gonna build secure attachment by telling parts of yourself that they're stupid.
He is stupid.
That doesn't work.
So another thing that I've been struggling with, and I think a lot of people are going to benefit from this, is a certain level of procrastination. So how can we get out of that sea of stuck? I'm noticing, so when it comes to the creation of new things, like I made a pivot from one career path into being a content creator and a podcaster. There's been an element of now I've changed my identity. I've had to shift from one part of myself into becoming this new person. Then there's a certain level of imposter syndrome surrounding that. With that comes this almost like a fear of success. If I allow, and it's so stupid because I'm online, people see me all the time, but
It's stupid? Really? You wanna
but
go with it's stupid?
but I have a fear of allowing myself to be seen, but I'm being seen.
Yes.
So it doesn't, it's conflicting and it doesn't make sense.
I'll see that, and sorry, I'm not meaning to call you out, but you're
Yeah.
like, "It's stupid." I'm like, "It's not stupid. I do it too." And
To me it is.
I get that. But again, it's not just you up there. You have
Yeah.
lots and lots of parts of you. I have the, and every high, and I've worked with high performing, high level people across every industry. Everyone has that part of them that feels like a little fraud. But it's to like present day Brit, I'm public. I'm like, I can talk to people. Everything is fine. But it's not just me in there. I've got younger parts of me that are terrified of people and are terrified of judgment and shame and all of the things. So I'm fine. She's not. So I would say you're fine, but that other part of you isn't. And he's not stupid. At some point, that was a thing. Go, Chloe. Yeah, the imposter thing is real, but I wish, again, if we're talking about weaponizing therapy speak, it's not a
Mhm.
syndrome, it's just part of being human. Any type of expansion or growth, like you work out, how do you build muscle? You tear them. Like you can't grow strong unless you rip your muscle fibers. And any type of growth or expansion is going to come with a degree of imposter stuff and fear and congruent. This makes no sense, but like it's there anyway. So instead of beating ourselves up for it, it's not a syndrome. It's human to grow and expand and feel like you don't belong in the room.
This is a big part of it, right? So you got to put yourself in the rooms that you think that you don't belong in, but at the same time, you have to hone the skills that'll give you the confidence to do exactly what you're doing. Even though I've never been a content creator before, this is a whole new world to me. It's weird, it's different, it's not police work. There's no real overlapping traits or anything that you would have from that other than being able to talk to people and navigate different situations. But there's just skills that you have to learn along the way. And the more you repeat those skills, the better you get at them. That feeling of being an imposter tends to just go away. It fades away and pretty quickly when you allow yourself to actually dive deep into it and not judge yourself in that process.
It's allowing yourself room to grow,
Yeah.
right? Because I've placed myself in rooms where I'm so uncomfortable, I want to jump out of my skin, but I'm not sitting there being like, I deserve to be here and I'm awesome. It's,
Right.
I deserve to be here and I have a lot to learn. And these are people I can learn from. And so it's holding both realities of I get to be in this room and where are my growing edges? Where do I need to be challenged? Where do I need to push and lean in and develop myself? I think there's this trend of I don't belong in any rooms to I belong in all the rooms and I don't need to do anything to make myself stronger or healthier or whatever. So it's both hands.
It's also falls into the relationships that we have with other people. I encourage people, look at who you're spending your time with and then pick better people to spend your time with because a
It's
lot of
so true.
yeah, they drag you down to a certain level, but it's an old level of where you've been previously and it because they can only see you as who they see you as, right? So who you are to them. And that can be frustrating because it's you're my best friend. I've known you for 20 years. And why are you treating me this way as I'm trying to do these new things? Why can't you be supportive of this thing that I'm embarking on that's really cool for me and I'm excited about? And I was hoping you could shed some light on why people might do that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because it was one of the more unpleasant surprises. Like when I was unhealthy and unfit and unwell and just a disaster, I had so many people who wanted to shower me with love and support. When I started getting healthy and successful and getting my life together and really leveling up, I like lost all my friends. I was like, wait, what is this? Like, where did everybody go? And the grieving process is not something people think needs to be part of the success process. But if you're on an achievement climb to anything and you don't have a grief kit in your back pocket, you're going to be in trouble and you're going to slide back down. Likely, not for everyone. Because being able to grieve the loss of the things that you knew, because not everyone's going to celebrate your success. Misery loves company, but success can be lonely until you find the better people. Like that gap between these are the people and playgrounds and playmates that I know, and here are my new people that are awesome. This gap is awful. It's
That's where I'm
lonely.
at.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awful. The space between where you were and where you're going and having no people to be on that journey. That's the part of the hero's journey. That's the like despair part. Like the
Mhm.
what have I done? I did all of the things. I quit drugs and I got my finances together and I'm doing the things and I have never felt so crappy. And that's the myth that making a good change feels good. And like leg day feels bad, cocaine feels good. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good. Just because it feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. So we gotta plan for some real losses as you level up because that's a thing that is guaranteed to happen.
You're going to lose people along the way, and you do have to grieve those relationships because a lot of them were a big part of your life. But you're also grieving the different parts of you that you have to leave behind in that process as well. That's the part that I think is probably one of the most difficult because it's literally yourself. It's a part of yourself and who you have known yourself to be. But you also have this burning desire that's like right in the center, just below your heart, and you can just feel it being lit up and you want to experience that and you want to push forward into those things even though it's uncertain for whatever reason. And I connect this to being more faith based and connecting with my faith that as I started to do that more, all of a sudden I had the audacity to continue to do the things that I want to do in my own life.
Yeah.
And now it's snowballed into, I can't really call this a thing, but it's a thing. And it's not a huge thing, but it's my thing. And with that, I get to share conversations like this and like all the different experiences. And I bring people together. I'm a connector. And in that comes this feeling of just of joy. And joy for me has been one of those things that I didn't know how to experience that. I had to figure that out later in life. Getting the dog helped me be able to experience joy because I never had a dog growing up. And if you don't witness joy from other people, you're not going to know what that looks like. So all the accolades I've ever had in my life, to include getting my master's degree, I look back on it and I was just like, it was a thing. I had to do it and I did it. I was always trying to play catch up to the rest of my peers because I felt like I was left behind in some way, shape, or form, like not performing at their level. And so there's all these little things that you like have to just leave behind in that process and then retroactively seek that joy in those past experiences. Say, you know what? No, actually getting my master's degree, that was a really hard thing that I did. And I'm actually really proud that I did that. And it took me a lot of time and there was a lot of hard work that went into that. And I should feel happy that I was able to accomplish that task and do it well.
I love that. And what you're saying about leaving parts of yourself behind really makes sense. These identities and all of these things. And again, our brains like familiar. So if you're trying to make a change and it's used to being this way, it's going to resist it. I try to think about the grieving process like I'm instead of leaving the parts behind, what if I can take them with me but just give them a new job assignment?
Ooh.
So like the part of me that was really good at scoring drugs, like very manipulative, very like lots of not good traits, but those traits actually translate really nice into persistence and resilience. And who do you think you are to pitch someone to be on their podcast? I send my little drug seeker out to send those pitches out because I don't like sending emails out saying, "Hey, I'd be a great podcast guest if let me throw my hat in the ring." But if you can think of your minds, all the parts of it like a company, when things are no longer a fit or work, you don't have to fire anybody or leave them. You just have to reassign them, retrain them, and give them a different job to do.
That's so good. It's so funny that you mentioned that because for me, it's the other side of that of, hey, I know I'm nobody, but can you come on my podcast?
I have that in reverse.
Hey, I know I don't have the followers that you do. Share an hour of your time with me.
And we all have it. It's
Yeah.
always the thing. And once you have the thing, I thought writing a book has been my dream since I was very little. And I was like, that is the be all end all. And then once I did it, then it was, yeah, I'm not so. And I didn't get such and such and did my little stupid. I had to really work with the different parts of myself to be like, if we stay in our lane, we're going to be just fine. But if we start swimming into other people's lanes, then we're screwed. So let's not do that.
No,
But it's work.
I love your books and you're a disruptor. And I have a pattern of bringing on disruptors onto the podcast because we talk about therapy and people have deified their therapist to such a degree that it leaves them feeling more stuck in that process. And then it's a lifetime of therapy. And maybe you don't need that. And maybe there's some other things that you could be doing. And I think that your books really highlight and give people back the power to be able to do those things in their own life, in their own time. And you make it so easy to understand that they can deploy these things in real time in their life. And again, it's just you feel competent and capable and confident in who you are as an individual and that you are an individual and that you can go out into the world and do the things that you truly do want to do. And I think that's something that you give back to people with your books.
Thank you. Yeah, finding this whole like parts work stuff, IFS specifically, makes it so, like you said earlier, how do we close the gap between the real and the ideal? It's you don't, you make space for all of it. And once you open up space for, I am a calm, confident, capable, compassionate person, and I suck, and I have parts of me that are
Right.
petty, and parts of me that do this, and parts of, but there's room in the inner landscape for all of it. And that's really good. And as a therapist, my job isn't to hold it. My job is to mirror you back to you and equip you so you can do this for yourself. And again, I still go to therapy regularly, not every week, but regularly. It's like when you need a coach, go get coaching.
Right.
But like the goal is for that capital S self to be active, alive, and thriving inside of you because you have one, I have one, we all have one.
Is there any questions that I didn't ask you today that you wish that I would have asked?
I think we covered pretty much everything. I'll just add anxiety is terrible, but anxiety, this is a hot take. This is going to get me in
Yeah.
trouble, but like anxiety is not a disorder. Really quick, if my check engine light comes on in my car and I bring my car to a mechanic, the The mechanic is not going to say your check engine light is on, therefore your car has check engine light disorder. But we do that with anxiety every single day. It's a signal. The symptom is a signal. End story.
But you know what a lot of people do is they might put a little piece of tape over that.
I did that.
I can't acknowledge that. I can't honor that. I can't look at that, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to
Tape.
barrel through this.
Yeah. True. That's pretty good.
Britt, thank you so much for being on the Blueprint podcast today. Tell everybody how they can reach you and get a hold of your new book.
This was fun. Thank you. You can find me on Instagram at Brit Frank. The books are The Science of Stuck and the Getting Unstuck workbook, and you can find them wherever you buy books.
Awesome. And they'll be linked in the show notes below, so be sure to check that out. And remember to rate and review the podcast, because that's how we grow. We just hit top 2.5% of all podcasts globally, and we're growing, but I need your reviews. You actually have to type some things in and say, hey, I really enjoyed that podcast with Britt. I appreciate it.